So the first thing we're going to do is just check the FTP, pick up the files that we need, filter them out, and then do the actual data ingestion process. You can see here as records flow across, you can see the numbers of files that are coming across and how they're kind of changing over time, right? We eventually end up with just 3 records based upon whether or not those ingestion pipelines are enabled or not. Then we're doing processing on each of these sort of source systems, right? So if I open up under this execution label here, you can sort of see the 3 different schools in this case that we're processing data for and what the status of each of those are, right? So you can see here, for example, we have Pine Tree Middle School. If I open that up, you can see the records as they kind of come across. And if I open up the actual profiling step, you can see that we're profiling based upon a series of criteria. So in here, we have files that come in for Pine Tree Middle School that involve data records based upon classes, enrollment, students, teachers, that sort of thing. So you have the ability to take a look at any one of those and see what the validation results are, right? So if I open up, for example, classes here, you can see here that we sort of, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see here that we sort of processed the records and that, everything was validated as expected, right? No sort of errors within the data files. And so therefore we didn't log any sort of issues. Now, if we take a look at some another school record, you might be able to see some sort of validation issues or errors within those records, right? So in here we have Springfield Middle School. In this case, we're still at a high level, taking a look at the data and profiling it. In this case, our validator at a high level is just taking a look for how many null records there are. If we expect that the null records are going to be very high, then that'll give us sort of an error, right? So in this case, we're looking for null records, and as long as it's less than 10%, we're going to kind of continue processing. If it's greater than 10%, we would stop processing and sort of throw out an error and alert the end user that there was an issue with the files uploaded. So in this case, we kind of continued processing and we wrote out the data to a database. This database eventually sort of informs another data pipeline where we pull out the record, right? So in this case, we have a database reader in another separate pipeline. Of course, this pipeline could be completely integrated into the existing one, but we kind of separate it out here to run it on an ad hoc basis as needed. So we have basically just reading from that same exact table where we wrote the profiling results, and we're kind of creating a spreadsheet from that information, right? And so if I pull up that spreadsheet here for you guys, you can see sort of what's being pulled out of that logging information, right? So in this case, we're looking at the number of null records versus the number of total records. And you can see sort of, even though we haven't reached that critical threshold of 10%, that the data is trending in the wrong direction for, in this case, teacher records, right? So we're getting more and more null counts for teacher records. And even before we hit that 10% threshold, if you put this information in front of the end user or in front of your sort of support team, then you can sort of address the error before it even reaches that threshold, right? So you might want to reach out to the school, let them know that that there's some sort of issue with the teacher records and that we're seeing more and more null records for teacher IDs in this case. And so this is great in that it allows you to sort of fix your data before it even fails, right? And so that's what ideally you want to do in most of these scenarios, right?